Curly, I'm back with another How to Draw video. Today we're going to be learning how to draw the nose and mouth. And, I've done a lot of videos on how to draw the mouth, but I've never actually done any video relating to the nose specifically. I thought I would combine the two into one video because I think it's the relationship between the mouth and the nose and the upper lip, that sort of structural area, the lower part of the nose, that I think can give you some problems. So what I'm going to do right now is begin by putting down some basic guidelines. First, people like to know the size that I'm working at, so I thought I would just say 3 inches all the way around on this square. That works out to about 7.5, maybe a little over 7.5 centimeters. And then, of course, just intersected right in the middle. So let's begin by putting down the basic guidelines of the mouth, and then I'll come back to explain where we go from there. Okay, so I've got the basic guidelines for the mouth in place, and like I said, I do have other videos that are devoted to drawing the mouth, and I will link to those in the info box. Someone said that like I'm the only person who calls it the info box. It's the description, Mark. Why do you call it the info box? I can't stop. I'm used to it now. In the info box, you will find links to my previous videos. There's at least 2 on drawing the lips. In any case, now it is time to start moving on to drawing the nose, and I think what I'll do is first get those 2 sort of light lines that form, what is that called? The upper lip. Those 2 little lines on the upper lip. You know what I'm talking about. I'm going to go ahead and put those lines in place. Alright, now I've made these lines super dark, like way too dark really, and in the end you will see that this is mostly rendered by way of shading. But I wanted to, just for clarity's sake, to get those lines in there. And you can see that it's a 3/4 point of view, the upper lip turning just a little bit away from us so that we can see the angle as it tilts upward towards the lower part of the nose. Speaking of which, it's time for us to get in a few basic guidelines for that. So let's go ahead and get into it. So here we see the 2 basic guidelines that we need to have for the nose from this point of view. Notice how the line curves up here, right from the sort of base of this first curving line of the upper lip, comes up here and touches this line right around where that first square was that I put into place back at the beginning. The angle of the nose is going to be different on different people's noses, of course. I had to just sort of choose one example nose for the purpose of this illustration. And then over here, notice the placement of this line, and this really does very nearly become a line. There are very few actual lines in nature, but I'm going to tone it down, but you will notice a sort of line here at the base of the nostril. I think we imagine, and on some people's faces maybe it does come further up, but I'm not going to draw a line that goes all the way around. And as for connecting these 2, I'm going to also just sort of leave that up to your imagination. Some shading later on is maybe going to finish that off, but I'm not going to connect those 2 lines. It's now time to put in the last important guideline, and that is for the nostril. And notice the placement here as I put it in, how close it is to this line over here on the left. Alright, so you see I've drawn a very wide, sort of slightly triangular shape here for the nostril, and this lower line that I've put into place, again, is going to get minimized and sort of rendered mainly by way of shadow. But believe it or not, that is essentially all we need for drawing the nose and the lips in terms of basic lines. The rest of it is all put in by way of shading. And in that sense, this video is going to dwell more on shading than a lot of my other videos do. So let's go ahead and start zooming in a little. I'm going to erase the grid pattern that was there to begin with, and then maybe we'll do a little bit of real-time shading to get started. Alright, so sorry about that. I forgot that I was going to add a line for the contour of the face. Pretty important in terms of getting the shading right, knowing the extent of the shading that the nose is going to cast across the face. So let's go ahead now and zoom in a little bit to get into the details of shading the nose. Okay, so I'm going to begin by adding some shading to the base of the nostril here. I'm holding the pencil low to the page. As those of you who have watched my videos before will recall, I like to get the pencil at a low angle so as to expose a lot of the lead. I'm not drawing with the tip, that way with these little circular motions I can build up a nice gray shadowy tone. Now the nose, as I'm drawing it, is being lit from the left, so there's a little bit of shade here, but I'm not going to go too far in that direction. Most of the deep shading is going to come over here on the right-hand side where the light can't reach. And one thing that I noticed as I studied various photos of noses and mouths at this angle was the degree to which the shading sort of connected this line over here, the sort of nostril line. That sounds like a single word, nostriline. Welcome to Nostriline. In any case, the nostril line here is, depending on how it's lit, but it does sort of connect, the shading connects right over to the nostril itself. Now I'm going to go ahead and start darkening in the nostril, trying to be very careful about not allowing the nostril to get too big. There is something about, I think the human eye is very sensitive to the proportions, and any time the nostril looks unusually large, it can just really throws off the drawing, makes the person look kind of pig-nosed somehow. So I'm always being extra cautious in this area. Although it does get, in photographs, pretty darkly shaded, because of course very little light can get in there. I certainly don't want to expand the size. I don't want it to be taking up any more space on the page than is absolutely necessary. So I'm probably going to be going back in here with my trusty black Prismacolor later on to darken that further. But let's start imagining a structural line, though I'm not really going to draw it too heavily, but sort of imagine that there's a line that comes across here and delineates the lower surface of the nose. And a lot of times cartoonists will actually go in and draw a line like that. I'm not actually going to do that. I'm just sort of doing that to show you the extent of the shading, but you're going to see me come in here and, as I was doing before, holding the pencil low to the page, begin to fill in this area with very, very light shading. And then have it sort of curve around here for the tip of the nose. Now, this probably should be thought of as the first of a series of videos because there are so many different nose types, both from one ethnic group to another and within, of course, all ethnic groups. There's great variety in terms of shapes of noses. So please don't think of this as like, this is the way all noses look. In Clone Land, where everyone has the exact same nose. So anyway, I've got a fair amount of sort of low-level shading that's going all the way around this, the tip of the nose. Notice how it sort of follows, it sort of echoes the curve of the nostril and curves just a little bit here. But one thing that I noticed in photos of certain people's noses, and again lit from this particular angle, that there was a secondary area of shading that came in right around here and almost, again, depending on the person, almost formed a bit of a line here, a structural subsection. Now there's a bit of reflected light coming off of the face or maybe the clothing or whatever, and that's why I'm not having this darkness go all the way up to the edge there. I'm leaving just a little bit of a lighter area there. And that actually can be a great trick, not just for drawing noses, but for all manner of things. When you get in that little area of reflected light, it really helps things to look more 3D. But I did notice certain people getting a fairly, it's not a line exactly, but it's a perceptible, a perceivable change in the toning. Right around there. One thing that surprised me was that there wasn't a real strong connection, as I said, between this line over here, at least in this lighting situation. It began, that some of the shading began to head over, but it really did not absolutely connect with this darkened area over here. Now, as we are getting down to the base of the nose, I can begin to connect the shading that I'm using for the underside of the nose and have it come down here and connect with this line of the upper lip. There are words for these, and I actually looked up sort of like anatomy of the upper lip, but now, darn it, I've forgotten. There's a word for these things. But you guys know what I mean, right? Huh? And so I'm sort of, again, with circular motions, I'm connecting this lower section of shading down into this sort of valley that forms in the upper lip. And over here, this, though I had drawn a line, I think it's a little harsh to think of that as a line. That's really maybe just a guideline that helps you remember where to have the shading trail off. So there's going to be fairly deep shadow over here on this side of the upper lip. And it gradually fades to the white of the page, at least the way I'm doing it, right around there. So yeah, that first line that I put in there was very much, I guess you might call it a reminder line rather than an actual line, showing you where to have that gradual transition take place. And then one last thing, again, depending on the lighting situation, but on many photos that I studied, some of the shadow cast by the nose was coming in and filling up a little bit of this valley. Can I call it the valley? I'm just going to call it the valley. The upper lip valley. Welcome, Valley of the Upper Lip. Sounds like a horror movie. They came to the Valley of the Upper Lip, and they didn't get out alive. Now I'm going in here and darkening things in quite a bit, and this is an area, you know, we talk about how there are no lines in nature normally, just these sort of changing areas of shade, but this is an area where you can almost get away with drawing a line. I gotta draw the line somewhere, people, and I'm drawing it here. But if you do start to, you know, go for quite a deep dark shadow over here, then, and commit to something that is, you know, fairly linear in nature, you have to decide where does that line stop. And in the photos that I studied, it stopped well before it would actually connect to this upper lip line. In fact, I feel like I've gone a bit too far. I'm going to go in and lighten it up a bit with the eraser. So I'm coming back in here again, and so all of this sort of upper lip ridge and valley system, provided you've got strong, bold light on one side, it is going to sort of all join together and cast a shadow right across the upper lip and onward onto the cheek. And yeah, later on, you know, I guess let's spend a little more real time here, since this is about the nose, and that's what I wanted to have be the main focus. We'll spend a little more real time talking about indicating a sort of a light sense of structure to the upper part of the nose. Now, very often you'll find in a lot of lighting situations that there's sort of a glint of light off the very tip of the nose. And indeed, looking at like Renaissance paintings and, you know, Impressionist portraits and so forth, very often the painter will put a dab of white paint right there. I have put, again, I guess what I'm going to begin to call reminder lines. Those lines there are sort of reminder lines to help me know when to have this very pale gray, which is sort of a bit of shading, skin shading across the front surface of the nose, where to have that begin to trail off. And I know some people hate to see me use my finger to blend things, but I'm doing it, people. I'm blending with my finger. And so yeah, like I said, this is not an actual line, but just sort of an area where we're going to trail off to the white of the page. I'm going to add in just a little extra bit of darkness right here, right around that tip, the tip of the nose. And this area over here also sort of darkening in a bit. I'm really having to go light with the pencil here. I don't want this to get too dark. But you may notice that I've changed the direction of my pencil strokes. Like over here I was going kind of straight across. Over here I'm sort of imagining the surface of the upper part of the nostril and how it would be curving across and building up. And there's a fairly flat surface coming right across here. So I'm just going in with a series of diagonal lines to build that up a little. And then again, I'm going to erase away here so as to create a sense of a little shimmer. You know, it's not like you don't want them to have a shiny nose like Rudolph. But just leaving that area white helps to define the structure of the nose. Now way over here, again, in this lighting section, lighting situation, I should say, we're going to get some extra darkness way over here at the far edge of the nose. Yeah, I think the way this is working out, you are in the midst of a very prolonged real-time section of the video, and this is mainly going to be the heart and soul of this video, the shading bit right here. I'm not going to devote any real time to the mouth. Like I said, I've covered that in other videos. But since we're doing it real time, let's go ahead and continue and add just a little bit of shade over here. As I said, this area over here can be thought of in a sort of a linear way. But I'm creating the line by way of shading, really, at this stage, not so much drawing a line. And again, here, as it curves up around the edge of the nostril, this is where it just sort of fades. On a youthful nose, I should say, maybe an older person, you're going to have that line go all the way across, and you're going to start adding other lines. Makes me think I should probably eventually do a video on the older person's face and the various wrinkles and so forth that form. I don't think I have covered that. Could be interesting, right? You know, especially like one of these really old people and the sort of really intense wrinkling that you can see can become a fun drawing challenge. I know I've seen people do sort of like photoreal illustrations of like some old fisherman, you know, whose face is all craggy and shows up. So anyway, you see me adding a bit of hopefully subtle shading over here. Of course, when a person smiles, this whole area of the cheek becomes really defined. This person's face is more or less relaxed, so you see a little hint of that sort of cheek line, but I'm not going to go any further with that in terms of darkening it in. So there you go. I think we've got the basics of the nose here. What I'm going to do is kick it into time-lapse and finish doing the mouth, all in time-lapse, much to the horror of people who don't like old man time-lapse. Me, I'm a big fan. Old man time-lapse, you knocked me out, man. Well, thank you. I'm just doing what comes naturally to me. So let's go ahead and do the rest of the mouth, all in time-lapse, and then I'll come back and maybe do a bit of real time with the black Prismacolor to sort of darken in certain key parts of the nose illustration. Alright, well, I got most of the shading done, and you can see that I spend quite a lot of time building up the shading. Sometimes people ask, how long did it take you to do this drawing? Today is sort of an unusual situation. I started a little later than usual. It's hard for me to calculate. I've probably spent at least 1 hour just on the shading that you saw since the real-time part of it stopped. So, yeah, that gives you some idea. It takes a while. It takes patience. In any case, I am going to switch now to my trusty black Prismacolor, which is just an ordinary black colored pencil. Which is to say, you know, if you bought a set of colored pencils and one of them is black, if it's a decent company, you know, that made that set of colored pencils, you should be able to get these same effects with that black colored pencil. And so I'm darkening in this area of the nostril, going pretty much to jet black. As I said before, I'm very cautious about not expanding the size, but as I studied photos, a true nostril, lit, unless it's lit from below, true nostril does go completely jet black, as no light can get in there, really. But I'm not going, you know, too far from top to bottom. I'm keeping it fairly narrow. And then over here, where I said it got quite linear, that's another place for me to go in with this black colored pencil. The whole idea is to create contrast. You know, when you are doing a drawing, especially when I was a kid, I would tend to it would all be like shades of pale gray, and it wouldn't really get dark anywhere. And as I got older, probably in my college years, it wasn't until then that I realized the real importance of going for big contrast. If you want to achieve the kinds of effects that you see me getting here, that is done, well, a big part of it anyway, is the degree of contrast. And so you see me building in here, again, sort of circular or looping motions of the pencil. I noticed as I studied photographs that, again, this area right in here at the base of the nose went pretty dark, not as dark as the nostril, but pretty dark, And yeah, we're kind of coming down to the end of things because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about adding black Prismacolor to the mouth. As I said, this is not this video does not focus on the mouth. I've done at least 2 videos that do. So let me go ahead and in time-lapse finish adding my black Prismacolor to the area of the lips, and then we're going to come back and do a little of my beloved gouache white paint to add highlights to the lips and maybe just a little bit to the nose. Okay, well, I'm done with the shading, and now it's time to pull out the beloved white gouache, which is just an opaque white paint available at arts and crafts stores. And I'm going to go ahead and, I don't know how much this will show up, but I'm going to add just a little touch of this to the very tip of the nose. It tends to be the place where light will glint off the nose. I don't know if the white gouache really belongs anywhere else, actually, to tell you the truth, in the area of the nose. I observed some photos would get just a little touch down there. But I am not going to go too far in that direction. Where it really ends up is on the lips, and I know that I said that this video is not about drawing the mouth, but I am not above contradicting myself. Just because I love displaying the technique of the white gouache. It really is pretty awesome for conveying a shimmering, shining surface. And so provided you've got a lot of that gray pencil down there to begin with, going in with this white gouache will really make a huge difference. I hope it's doing so as this is captured on video, in terms of making these lips look really shiny. And that's probably going to bring us to the end of this video. I think what I'll do is just finish up in time-lapse a little bit of the white gouache work, and then I'll come back with a few final words. All right, well, there's my video on how to draw the nose and how it connects to the upper lip. I hope you found this one helpful. And what I probably will do at some point is a separate video covering the sort of bridge of the nose and how it connects to the forehead and the eyes. This one, of course, was focusing entirely on the lower section of the nose, but I think you'll agree that's the part that's trickiest to draw. Anyway, let me thank anyone who has supported